Morning, everybody. Thank you for coming along today. I'm Patrick Shafe, Commercial Director at Deanta, and this is our fourth annual survey examining how this industry is adapting to the economic, technological, and cultural forces of change. A full report will be made available today, so please check your Hoover app for details, find me on LinkedIn, or better yet, visit us at booth 211 in the exhibition hall. And by way of introduction, Deanta is a publishing solutions company headquartered in Dublin with offices in Chennai. We're production focused and support our clients in three interconnected ways: services, technology, and consultancy. And we work with a range of academic publishers across both books and journals, including some of the world's largest, such as Taylor & Francis, Bloomsbury Academic, and Rowman & Littlefield. And in an industry slow to adopt new technologies, Deanta was established to help foster change. We recognize that some publishers want to become more agile, producing and managing content, not just books and journals. We saw the potential for technology to simplify operations and provide data to businesses, but we didn't want to do the exact same thing, only quicker and cheaper. We saw data science-led automation as a means to genuinely change production and drive lasting efficiencies. And Deanta still offer on and offshore services, but are increasingly working and consulting with publishers to develop new and smarter ways of working, including autonomous use of technologies such as our own production platform, Landstad. We believe that this industry, which has outsourced so many of its functions over the last 2 decades, has an opportunity to revolutionize the way it operates. And through the kind of technologies that Deanta is developing, become operationally independent and able to work with its vendors and partners without being tied to their technologies. This is what we call next level publishing. But before we begin, let's take a look at the key results from last year's survey. And looking at outcomes, we saw that digital transformation had not yet impacted the traditional content formats. This industry is still very much book and journal shaped. Uncertainty of revenues was evident in the decline of print sales, and the sheer complexity of the market was stifling progress for some. Meanwhile, accessibility and a better carbon footprint were low down in the pecking order of priorities. Looking at processes, our report suggested that academic publishing was still fragmented, and the divide between those embracing new technologies and those not as wide as ever. And though production workflows were being reviewed, modernization was not always being delivered as an outcome. Finally, on people and culture, there was some evidence that change was coming, particularly with the impact of data science, but a conservative culture was keeping innovation in check. So on to this year, and we start with outcomes, which are the goals and strategies that publishers are targeting. And we open this year with a new question and ask publishers to rank their most significant challenges that they felt were facing the industry as a whole. We were interested to see 3 of the top 4 challenges being shared concerned industry-wide, those being expansion of OA, finding the right business model, and keeping up to date with technology. We're less surprised to see book publishers still ranking cost-cutting and driving efficiencies so highly, given their tendency to adopt new technologies more slowly than journal publishers. And it was no surprise to learn that the rise of ChatGPT-like AI authoring tools took bottom spot, although we'll watch this topic carefully in the future. We then asked publishers to look inward and rank the changes that they believed their own organizations need to make. In previous years, speed to market and cost cutting were the key strategic goals, but that changed last year when digital transformation took top spot. We argued at the time that this result may have marked the beginning of the end of cost cutting as a strategy in itself. But our prediction may have been premature, with this year's survey showing operational efficiencies still in first place. However, improving discoverability of products is now a top 3 concern for both sectors. Looking at the bottom 3, speed to market was listed by both, suggesting that this challenge is now being addressed. So we then asked publishers, where should they invest to ensure that they meet these needs head on? Industry-wide, the top choice was increased discoverability of content through marketing and metadata, closely followed by production workflow technologies. This production focus was consistent with last year's survey, suggesting that publishers still believe that the modernization of production has not yet been optimized. And it's worth noting that industry-wide, investing in sustainable technologies to reduce carbon footprint took bottom spot. After a similar result last year, I had a number of conversations with publishers and know that this is a real concern for many, but it's clear that this is still not a top priority. In 2022, publishers were clear about what was stopping them from achieving their goals, with the top 3 challenges being lack of revenue, inefficient working practices, and legacy technology. This year's survey shows similar results, with outdated technology being a key challenge industry-wide. For journal publishers, developing a clear strategy ranked as the biggest single challenge, a marked change from last year when only 5% saw this as a concern. For book publishers, inefficient practices are still the key obstacle, suggesting that technological progress for book publishers remains slow. Neither sector cited recruiting the right talent or commissioning content as factors preventing success. And academic publishing remains a buoyant industry, with most publishers reporting being in profit. During 2020, the shifting sands of the market created real uncertainty of revenue for the industry. But this year, revenues for book publishers paint a far more familiar picture. 59% stating that print revenues were rising. And this insight was backed up by Jenny Rideout of Bloomsbury Academic, who at a recent IPG meeting stated that print sales were back to pre-pandemic levels. More than 50% of book publishers also reported that digital sales and OA sales were also on the up. For journal publishers, the revenue seesaw was more striking, with 90% saying that OA revenues were increasing, but 55% seeing subscription revenues in decline. And certainly the recovery of print revenues seen in the book sector is not matched for journals, with 75% seeing print income continuing to fall. Last year, we reported OA settling into a workable model for most. This year's survey suggests that OA is ballooning. For journal publishers, 60% reported increased demand from authors, and 63% have established specific workflows to manage OA. Last year, 20% predicted the shift to OA would cause an overall drop in revenue. But this year, 50% of journal publishers see OA as a sustainable revenue stream. For many book publishers, OA is already a reality, though the market is still small, with 75% stating that OA accounts for less than 10% of their output. However, book publishers' interest in OA is rising, with 45% pressing for development of an OA books business model, and 31% seeing OA books as a sustainable revenue stream. So onto our second section, processes, in which we ask publishers about their operations. And Deanta are evangelists for digital transformation and have invested heavily in technologies to drive better outcomes for our clients. We were keen, therefore, to understand how satisfied publishers are with the technologies that they use. The good news is that across both sectors, very few were fundamentally dissatisfied. The satisfaction gulf begins to widen, however, at the level of somewhat dissatisfied, with 35% of book publishers choosing this option compared to only 5% of journal publishers. This gulf widens further across the top two categories, suggesting that book publishers are generally less happy than journal publishers about the technology tools that they have to hand. And staying on this theme, we then asked publishers to rate their organization's commitment to staying up to date. A similar books and journals divide emerged, with 67% of book publishers labeling their organization's efforts as middling, and only 33% of journal publishers saying the same. 5% of book publishers said their organizations were poor at staying up to date, whilst no journal publishers said the same. Indeed, 30% of journal publishers ranked their organizations as very good. And maybe this should be no surprise, given that journal publishers rely on technology to cope with high volumes of work in tight timeframes. Book publishers, by contrast, tend to work to longer schedules, more manageable with traditional low-scale technologies such as Word, email, and PDF. And this theory is backed up when asking publishers how much purpose-built tech they use day to day, with journal publishers leading the way. As good as it may be, technology is not a panacea. And to paraphrase Bill Gates, automation applied to an efficient operation will magnify the efficiency, but automation applied to an inefficient operation will magnify the inefficiency. Nevertheless, when asked to rate the efficiency of their own organization, 33% of journal publishers rated them as very efficient and 74% as somewhat. For book publishers, only 12% rated their operations as very efficient and 52% as somewhat. But it was striking that both sectors agreed that the production department is a prime candidate for further efficiency gains. And at first glance, when we look at why production is a top target for efficiency gains, there seem to be some contradictions, especially since industry-wide production has seen the most attention to date. Despite work reviews, 45% of book publishers are still managing production using traditional low-scale technologies, such as Word, emails, and PDF, and only 17% use XML-first platforms. The number of journal publishers using XML-first platforms was significantly higher, at 60%, but still low for a sector dealing with volume at speed. More surprising still was the 14% of journal publishers who claim to still be managing journals using the same traditional low-scale technologies. And last year, 90% agreed that modernizing the production workflow should be the key business priority. And we were surprised to see a similar response this year, with 80% still looking for modernization. This repeat result might suggest that publishers are not yet modernized to the extent that they think possible and are still looking for further improvements in their production workflows. We know from our own work that rapid expansion of OA is impacting production capacity at many publishers. But rather than throw more money at the problem, publishers are looking for smarter ways of working, smarter ways which not only drive efficiencies, but also allow publishers to adopt a digital-first strategy and do more with their content. So onto our final section, where we look at people and the skills and culture that publishers are employing to get the job done. And with so much complexity in the marketplace and so much opportunity for innovation, we were interested to understand how publishers rated their organization's commitment towards culture and change. And we started by asking respondents to evaluate their organization's adaptability, a strength that has faced considerable challenge in recent times. Whilst not an outright affirmation, the response was largely positive and a reflection perhaps as to how well the industry has coped with the changing organizational needs post-COVID. We then asked respondents to rate their organization's decision-making transparency. This question seems especially relevant since technology can support transparent, data-driven decision-making and can also contribute to the breakdown of traditional silos and hierarchies, something which may be familiar to many in this industry. From our results, the consensus seems to be that publishers are indeed engaging their staff, with few from either camp suggesting that decision-making was anything other than transparent. And a healthy number, 45% of journal publishers, ranking their organizations as very transparent. But data is useless without context and interpretation. So we were curious to understand whether publishers were employing data scientists and in what capacity they were being used. The results show a sharp contrast between book and journal publishers in recruitment and application, with the majority of data science recruits for journals being used to support decision-making, something only 14% of book publishers could attest to. And it was interesting to note that on this evidence, journal publishers may see greater potential for data science than book publishers, 40% of whom were not sure about the impact data science is having, and 28% of whom saw no significant use for it in their organizations. Last year, we invited publishers to define their organization's culture by ranking a number of cultural characteristics. The results highlighted the Jekyll and Hyde nature of this industry, with equal numbers describing themselves as either traditional or agile. This year, that equilibrium has changed, and the conservative nature of the industry has shown itself to still be present. Both sectors describe themselves as cautious and siloed, with book publishers adding traditional to that mix. Only journal publishers bucked the trend, with 42% describing themselves as progressive. And it was interesting to note that both sectors ranked agile, entrepreneurial, and innovative in last place. Unsurprisingly, in 2022, the majority of new skills were focused on hybrid working. And this year, bedding in a hybrid workforce continues to be a key skill on which the majority of publishers are focused. And aside from hybrid working, a key drive for both sectors is to create more varied products and then market these products differently. But it was noticeable that very few publishers are recruiting from non-publishing backgrounds to boost their digital capabilities. Indeed, 23% of journal publishers said that their core skill sets had not changed markedly in the last 2 years, a figure higher still for book publishers at 32%. And 2 years ago, our survey showed that hybrid working was becoming the norm, with 50% working from home exclusively. However, last year's survey saw only 35% of people agree that working remotely was having a positive impact on their performance. On the evidence of this year's survey, the work that publishers have taken to settle their remote workforce looks to be paying off, with 50% now seeing remote working as having a positive impact on their performance. Industry-wide, only 9% suggested that remote working was having a negative effect on their performance, and only 6% want to return to the office full time. And Deanta strive to be seen as partners to our customers, not just vendors or suppliers that deliver an arm's length service via a technology platform. And being partners means valuing communications, consulting with clients on a regular basis, and creating relationships at every level. So we were keen to understand, therefore, whether publishers felt the same. So we asked them to indicate the nature of their vendor relationships. We were pleased to see the majority of publishers have strong relationships with their vendors. 80% industry-wide saying their relationships were close, with 55% going so far as to see their vendors as partners. But it was striking that almost 40% of book publishers claim not to have changed vendors in the last 5 years, a figure which may account for the slow pace of progress. So to summarize, revenues are far less certain than they were a year ago, with print revenues recovering for book publishers and OA revenues continuing to climb for journal publishers. Technology is being used to help with discoverability and to drive further efficiencies, with production still being the clear department for modernization. And publishers have done a great job to settle a remote workforce, but the industry remains conservative and cautious, despite seeing the clear benefits available from new technologies. So that's the end of our preview. Thank you for listening. As I said, a full report will be released today, so please check your app with a link to our download page. If anyone has any questions, I think we've got a couple of minutes. I can either take them now or please visit our booth at any time over the next few days. Thank you. Well, we don't release all of that data, but we have a database of over 1,000 individuals, mainly based around the US and the UK. In the survey, it breaks that sample down by exact type, what departments they work in, whether they specialize in journals or book publishers. As I said, we send it to over 1,000. We get several hundred reply each year. It seems to climb each year as well. Yeah, please.
You said that in this year's survey, the biggest challenge for journal publishers was developing clear strategy, and it sounded like that was up from quite a low base the previous year. Could you comment on why that might be?
Well, I mean, I'm one of anyone in this room wants to comment on that, really. I mean, for me, I suppose when I talk to publishers, it's the rise of OA and the various economic models that they have, and that certainly came up in some of our responses here. It's fair to say that this survey here only shows some of the answers that come through. We don't show every answer, but certainly the complexity of the market is more complex, it seems, for journal publishers tackling OA as a whole revenue stream, and the birth of digital native OA publishers as well, who are challenging the market in new ways. That would be my answer. I'm sure it's open to interpretation from other people as well. Any other questions? Okay.